Today, we're going to hear an emotional story about a struggling janitor's daughter who takes on the impossible task of nannying for a powerful sheik's unruly nieces, transforming their lives forever. Before this exciting story, tell US where you're listening from, and leave a like if you enjoy it, or comment something if you don't like it and want to help US improve our story. The rain poured down mercilessly on the streets of Manhattan as Abigail Morgan rushed to catch the bus. At 24, with her worn-out sneakers and second-hand coat, she looked nothing like the typical New Yorker hustling through the financial district. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and her face, though beautiful, showed signs of someone who had faced more than her fair share of hardship. The bus was crowded as usual, filled with the morning commuters heading to their respective jobs. Abigail held onto the handrail, her mind racing with worry. Her father, Robert Morgan, had been the head janitor at the prestigious Hathaway International Building for over 15 years. But 3 days ago, he had slipped on a freshly mopped floor and broken his hip. The doctor said he would need months of recovery, and the medical bills were already piling up. Their modest apartment in Queens, which they had managed to keep despite the rising rent prices, suddenly felt like a luxury they couldn't afford. The insurance would cover some of the medical expenses, but not all of them, and certainly not the rent and utilities while her father was unable to work. Abigail had been working part-time at a local bookstore while finishing her degree in early childhood education. The pay was minimal, barely enough to cover her own expenses. Now, with her father's injury, she needed something that paid much more. As the bus approached her stop, Abigail took a deep breath. She had an interview today at Hathaway International, not as a teacher or even an office assistant, but as a temporary replacement for her father. It wasn't what she had studied for, but it was a job, and they had agreed to pay her the same wage as her father out of respect for his years of service. The Hathaway International building stood tall and imposing, its glass facade reflecting the gray sky. Abigail had been here many times before, visiting her father during lunch breaks or bringing him dinner when he worked late. But today, she entered through the employee entrance, her heart heavy with the weight of their circumstances. Mr. Peterson, the building manager, greeted her with a sympathetic smile. Abigail, thank you for coming in. How's your father doing? He's stable, thank you. The doctors say he'll need physical therapy after the cast comes off, she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. Well, we miss him around here. He's the best janitor we've ever had, Mr. Peterson said, leading her to his office. Now, about the position. It would be temporary, of course, until your father recovers. The hours are the same, 6 a.m. to 2 p.m., and as I mentioned on the phone, we'll maintain his salary. Abigail nodded gratefully. I appreciate that, Mr. Peterson. Dad has always spoken highly of how well he's been treated here. We take care of our own, he said, sliding a contract across the desk. The job is yours if you want it. You can start tomorrow. As Abigail signed the contract, she couldn't help but feel a mixture of relief and disappointment. Her dreams of teaching would have to wait, but at least they wouldn't lose their apartment. The next morning, Abigail arrived at the building before sunrise. Mr. Peterson gave her a brief tour, showing her where the supplies were kept and introducing her to the other maintenance staff. Most of them knew her already from her visits to her father, and they welcomed her warmly, offering help and advice. For the first few days, Abigail fell into a routine. She mopped floors, cleaned bathrooms, emptied trash bins, and dusted offices before the employees arrived. It was hard, physical work, but there was also a certain satisfaction in seeing the results of her efforts. The gleaming floors, the spotless mirrors, the organized spaces. On the fourth day, as she was cleaning the executive floor, Abigail noticed a commotion near the elevators. A group of people had just arrived, and they seemed to be causing quite a stir. At the center of the group was a tall man with an imposing presence, dressed in an impeccably tailored suit. His features were sharp, his skin olive-toned, and his eyes a piercing dark brown. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to power. Behind him trailed two young girls, perhaps 8 and 10 years old, both dressed in expensive-looking clothes that seemed at odds with their scowling faces. They were arguing loudly in a language Abigail didn't understand, occasionally switching to accented English to make demands of the harried-looking woman who was trying to corral them. "I want chocolate. Now," the younger one demanded, stamping her foot. "Miss Layla, please, we're in a public place," the woman pleaded, her voice tinged with desperation. "I don't care. I want chocolate," Layla shouted, her voice echoing in the marble lobby. The older girl, meanwhile, had wandered off and was pressing all the elevator buttons, much to the annoyance of the waiting employees. The tall man seemed oblivious to the chaos, engaged in a serious conversation with another executive. Abigail watched as the woman, trying to manage the children, grew increasingly flustered. Finally, the man turned around, noticing the disruption. "Zara, Layla, enough," he commanded, his voice stern but controlled. The girls immediately stopped what they were doing and looked at him with wide eyes. But the moment he turned back to his conversation, they resumed their mischief, this time with more subtlety. Abigail continued her cleaning, trying not to stare, but she couldn't help overhearing the conversation between the harried woman and another staff member. "That's the third nanny this month," the staff member whispered. "I can't do this anymore," the woman replied, close to tears. "They're impossible. Sheikh Karim is a wonderful employer, but his nieces, they're demons. I quit." With that, she handed what looked like a resignation letter to the staff member and walked toward the elevators, leaving the two girls unsupervised once again. Abigail watched as the older girl, Zara, casually stuck out her foot, tripping a passing employee who was carrying a stack of files. Papers flew everywhere, and while the employee apologized profusely to Sheikh Karim, the girls giggled behind their hands. Without thinking, Abigail put down her mop and went to help gather the scattered papers. As she knelt on the floor, collecting documents, she found herself face to face with Zara, who was watching her with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. "You missed one," Zara said, pointing to a paper that had slid under a nearby plant pot. Abigail reached for it, then looked directly at Zara. "Thank you. It would have been even more helpful if you hadn't caused this mess in the first place." Zara's eyes widened in surprise, not used to being addressed so directly. Before she could respond, Sheikh Karim approached, his expression unreadable. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, his voice deep and authoritative. Abigail stood up, suddenly aware of how she must look in her janitor's uniform, facing one of the most powerful men in the building. "No problem, sir. Just helping to pick up these papers." "Are you enjoying our story? Tell us where you're watching our videos from. Leave your city in the comments and what else you enjoy listening to. Suggest a story for us." Sheikh Karim's eyes narrowed slightly as he observed her. There was something in his gaze that made Abigail feel as though he was seeing more than just a janitor. "What's your name?" he asked. "Abigail Morgan, sir. I'm temporarily replacing my father, Robert Morgan, while he recovers from an injury." Recognition flickered across his face. "Robert? Yes, excellent man. I hope he recovers quickly." He paused, then added, "My nieces seem to have driven away another nanny." Abigail glanced at the girls, who were now pretending to be perfectly behaved, though she could see the mischief lurking in their eyes. "Children can be challenging," she said diplomatically. "These two are particularly so," Sheikh Karim replied with a hint of weariness. "Their parents, my brother and his wife, died in an accident 2 months ago. I brought them to New York while I handle some business matters, but finding suitable care has been difficult." Abigail's heart softened at this information. No wonder the girls were acting out. They had lost their parents and been uprooted to a foreign country, all within a short span of time. "I'm very sorry for your loss," she said sincerely. And theirs. Something in her tone must have resonated with Sheikh Karim, because he looked at her with renewed interest. "You speak as though you understand." "I lost my mother when I was 9, Abigail said simply. "It changes everything." For a moment, there was silence between them, a shared understanding of grief that transcended their vastly different positions in life. Then, abruptly, Sheikh Karim made a decision. "MS. Morgan, would you be interested in a different position? One that pays considerably more than janitorial work?" Abigail blinked in surprise. "What position?" nanny to my nieces. The salary would be triple what you're making now, plus room and board at my residence. Abigail looked at the girls, who were now watching the conversation with intense interest. I, I don't know, sir. I'm not sure I'm qualified. Do you have experience with children? I have a degree in early childhood education, but then you're more qualified than the last three nannies combined, he interrupted. And you've already shown more insight into their situation than anyone else has. Abigail's mind raced. Triple her current salary would solve their financial problems immediately. But could she handle these clearly troubled children? And what about her father? As if reading her thoughts, Sheikh Karim added, "You would have weekends off, of course, to visit your father. And our family physician could oversee his care if you wish." It was an incredibly generous offer, one that would solve all her immediate problems. Yet Abigail hesitated, looking again at the girls. Zara was whispering something to Layla, who giggled in response, both of them eyeing her speculatively. "Can I have a day to think about it?" she asked. Sheikh Karim looked surprised, as if he wasn't accustomed to people not immediately accepting his offers. "Of course, but I will need your answer by tomorrow. We leave for the Hamptons in 3 days, and I need to make arrangements." Abigail nodded. "I understand. Thank you for the opportunity, Sheikh Karim." As she returned to her cleaning duties, Abigail's mind was in turmoil. The offer was tempting, more than tempting. It was potentially life-saving for her and her father's financial situation. But those girls, they clearly needed more than just supervision. They needed someone who could understand their grief and help them navigate it. That evening, Abigail visited her father in the hospital. Robert Morgan looked pale against the white sheets, but his smile was warm when he saw his daughter. "How was your day, Abby?" he asked as she sat beside his bed. Abigail told him about the encounter with Sheikh Karim and his nieces and the unexpected job offer. Her father listened attentively, his weathered face thoughtful. "It sounds like an incredible opportunity," he said when she had finished. "But those poor girls, losing their parents like that. That's what I keep thinking about," Abigail admitted. "They're acting out because they're hurting. I remember how I felt after Mom died, how lost and angry I was." Robert reached for her hand. "And you had me to help you through it. These girls have an uncle who's probably doing his best, but he's grieving too, and he's got his business to run. So you think I should take the job? I think those girls need someone who understands what they're going through. And from a practical standpoint, the money would certainly help us out of this tight spot." Abigail squeezed her father's hand. "I'll miss you, though, and I worry about you being alone." "I'll be fine," he assured her. "The doctors say I can go home in a week, and Mrs. Patel next door already offered to check in on me. Plus, you'll have weekends off, right?" After leaving the hospital, Abigail walked through the city streets, deep in thought. By the time she reached their small apartment, she had made her decision. The next morning, she approached Sheikh Karim's office with determination. His assistant, a poised woman named MS. Chun, ushered her in immediately. Sheikh Karim was on the phone, but he gestured for her to sit. As Abigail waited, she noticed the framed photographs on his desk. One a man who resembled him standing with a beautiful woman, presumably his late brother and sister-in-law, and another of the two girls, smiling widely, looking carefree in a way she hadn't seen in person. When he ended his call, Sheikh Karim turned his full attention to her. "Have you made your decision, MS?" "Morgan, I have," Abigail said, sitting up straighter. "I'll accept the position, but I have a few conditions." Sheikh Karim raised an eyebrow, clearly not accustomed to conditions being placed on his offers. "Go on. First, I'd like a 2-week trial period for both your nieces and myself. If it doesn't work out, I return to my janitorial position with no hard feelings." He nodded slowly. "That seems reasonable. Second, I'd like to be able to call my father daily and have transportation provided for my weekend visits." "Of course." And third, Abigail continued, gathering her courage, "I need the authority to implement my own approach with the girls. I won't be just another nanny they can chase away. I need to be able to establish routines, consequences, and rewards without interference." Sheikh Karim studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, surprisingly, he smiled, a small, genuine smile that transformed his stern features. "MS. Morgan, Those are exactly the kind of conditions I would hope for from someone who takes their responsibilities seriously. You have my full support. Relief washed over Abigail. Thank you. When would you like me to start? Today, if possible. We leave for the Hamptons on Friday morning. And just like that, Abigail's life changed completely. By that afternoon, she had spoken with Mr. Peterson, who assured her that her janitorial position would remain open if she needed to return to it. She had packed a suitcase of her modest belongings and been driven in a sleek black car to Sheikh Karim's Manhattan penthouse, a sprawling, luxurious space that occupied the top two floors of an exclusive building overlooking Central Park. MS. Chun showed her to her room, which was larger than the entire living room of her apartment in Queens. It had its own bathroom with a bathtub that could fit 3 people, a walk-in closet, and a window seat overlooking the park. The girls' rooms are down the hall. MS. Chun explained. They each have their own bedroom and share a playroom. Sheikh Karim's suite is on the upper level, along with his home office. The staff quarters are on this level as well. There's a housekeeper, a cook, and a driver who all live in. Abigail nodded, trying not to look overwhelmed. And where are the girls now? In the playroom with Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. She's been keeping an eye on them since the last nanny left, but she has her own duties to attend to. MS. Chun led her to a brightly colored room filled with toys, books, and electronic devices that probably cost more than everything Abigail owned. Zara and Layla were there, Zara playing a video game, while Layla was building something with expensive-looking building blocks. An older woman, presumably Mrs. Winters, looked up with obvious relief when they entered. Girls, this is MS. Morgan, MS. Chun announced. She's going to be your new nanny. Zara barely glanced up from her game. Whatever. She'll be gone by dinner. Layla studied Abigail with narrowed eyes. You're the cleaning lady. I was filling in for my father, who is the head janitor at your uncle's office building. Abigail corrected gently. But I'm also a trained teacher, and now I'm your nanny. Not for long, Zara muttered. MS. Chun and Mrs. Winters exchanged glances, then excused themselves, leaving Abigail alone with the girls. For a moment, there was silence except for the electronic sounds of Zara's game. Abigail took a deep breath and sat down on the floor near Layla. That's an impressive structure you're building, she commented, nodding at the complex tower of blocks. Layla shrugged. It's nothing. I used to build better ones with Baba. Abigail noted the Arabic word for father and the past tense that carried so much weight. Your father liked to build things with you? Layla nodded, her small face suddenly vulnerable. He was an architect. He taught me about balance and support structures. That's wonderful that he shared his knowledge with you, Abigail said warmly. My mom was an artist. She taught me how to mix colors before she died. Layla's head snapped up. Your mom died too? Yes, when I was about your age. From across the room, Zara had paused her game and was listening, though she pretended not to be. Did you cry a lot? Layla asked in a small voice. I did, Abigail admitted. And sometimes I still do when I miss her very much. It's okay to cry when you miss someone you love. Layla's lower lip trembled, and for a moment, Abigail thought she might break down. But then she straightened her shoulders and returned to her blocks. I don't cry. Crying is for babies. Who told you that? Abigail asked gently. The last nanny. She said we had to be brave and stop making such a fuss. Anger flared in Abigail's chest at the insensitivity of the previous nanny. Well, I think that's nonsense. Feeling sad when you lose someone you love isn't making a fuss. It's being human. Zara had abandoned any pretense of not listening. Our uncle doesn't cry, she said challengingly. Adults sometimes hide their feelings because they think they need to be strong, Abigail explained. But that doesn't mean they don't feel sad too. The girls exchanged glances, clearly processing this information. Abigail decided not to push further for now. So, what would you both like to do this afternoon? I'm new here, so maybe you could show me around the neighborhood? Zara's eyes lit up with what Abigail suspected was mischief. We could go to the park. That sounds lovely, Abigail agreed, already anticipating that the girls might try to give her the slip in the public space. Let me just check with MS. Chun about the security protocols. Zara's face fell slightly, her plan already thwarted. Abigail hid a smile as she texted MS Chun, who promptly informed her that the girls were not to leave the building without a security detail, given their uncle's high profile. It looks like we need to have security with us when we go out, Abigail informed them. So we can either go to the park with security or find something fun to do here. The park is boring anyway, Zara declared, returning to her game. What about baking something? Abigail suggested. My mom taught me how to make the best chocolate chip cookies. Layla perked up at the mention of chocolate. Can we really? If it's okay with the cook, I don't see why not. The next hour was spent in the state-of-the-art kitchen, where the cook, a friendly French man named Philippe, was happy to let them use a corner of his domain. Abigail guided the girls through measuring ingredients, mixing the dough, and shaping the cookies. To her surprise, both girls became engaged in the activity, arguing less and even giggling together when Layla got flour on her nose. As the delicious smell of baking cookies filled the kitchen, Abigail noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. The girls were still guarded, still testing her, but there was a tentative connection forming. When Sheikh Karim returned home that evening, he found all three of them in the dining room, a plate of slightly misshapen but delicious-smelling cookies on the table, and the girls actually sitting and eating their dinner without complaint. He paused in the doorway, clearly surprised by the peaceful scene. "Good evening, Uncle Karim," Layla called out. "We made cookies with MS Morgan." "Did you?" he replied, approaching the table. "And how was your day?" "It was okay," Zara said with studied nonchalance, but there was less hostility in her voice than before. Sheikh Karim's eyes met Abigail's over the girls' heads, a question in them. She gave a small nod, indicating that things were going as well as could be expected for a first day. MS Morgan's mom died too, Layla announced suddenly. "When she was my age." Sheikh Karim looked startled, then his expression softened. "I see. That must have been very difficult." "She says it's okay to cry when you miss someone," Layla continued, watching her uncle carefully. "Even for grown-ups." A shadow crossed Sheikh Karim's face, a brief glimpse of the grief he kept hidden. "Your new nanny is very wise," he said quietly. That night, after the girls were in bed, Sheikh Karim invited Abigail to his home office. The space was elegant but comfortable, with leather furniture and walls lined with books. "How did it really go?" he asked, offering her a seat. Abigail sat down, gathering her thoughts. "Better than I expected. Honestly, they're testing me, of course, but they're also reaching out in their own way. They seem calmer with you," he observed. "What's your secret?" "No secret," Abigail replied. "Just honesty about grief. They need to know it's okay to feel what they're feeling." Sheikh Karim was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Their parents, my brother and sister-in-law, were extraordinary people. Tard was not only my brother, but my best friend. When they died," he trailed off, unable to continue. "I'm truly sorry for your loss," Abigail said softly. "The girls were there," he said abruptly. "In the car. They survived with minor injuries, but they saw everything. The doctors say they're physically fine, but emotionally." He shook his head. "I don't know how to help them. I'm not equipped for this." Abigail's heart ached for all three of them. The grieving uncle trying his best, and the traumatized children who had lost everything familiar. "You're doing the best you can," she assured him. "And now they have me too. We'll figure out together." For the first time since she'd met him, Sheikh Karim looked vulnerable, his confident facade cracking to reveal the worried, grieving man beneath. "Thank you, MS Morgan. I believe they're in good hands with you." As Abigail returned to her room that night, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. These children had been through unimaginable trauma, and they needed more than just supervision. They needed healing. And perhaps, in helping them heal, she might find a purpose beyond just paying the bills. The next few days established a routine. Mornings were spent on educational activities. Abigail discovered that both girls were bright, but had fallen behind in their studies due to the upheaval in their lives. Afternoons included physical activities, art projects, and occasional outings with security in tow. Evenings were for quiet time, reading, and preparing for bed. There were challenges, of course. Zara, in particular, tested boundaries constantly, from refusing to participate in activities to trying to sneak out of the penthouse. Layla had nightmares that left her screaming in the night, images of the accident haunting her dreams. But there were also moments of connection, like when Zara, after initially refusing to join an art project, eventually sat down and created a beautiful drawing of a desert landscape that she explained was near their home in Abu Dhabi. Or when Layla, after a particularly bad nightmare, allowed Abigail to hold her while she cried, finally releasing some of the pent-up grief she had been carrying. By Thursday evening, the day before they were to leave for the Hamptons, Abigail felt cautiously optimistic. The girls weren't magically healed. Their grief and trauma were too profound for that, but they were beginning to trust her to let her in. As she helped them pack for the trip, Zara asked suddenly, "Are you coming with us to the Hamptons?" "Of course," Abigail replied, folding a sweater. "Unless you'd rather I didn't." Zara shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. "Whatever. It's probably boring there anyway." "Actually, I've never been to the Hamptons," Abigail admitted. "I've lived in New York my whole life, but my family couldn't afford vacations in places like that." Zara looked genuinely surprised. "Really? But it's not that far away." "Distance isn't always the issue," Abigail explained. "Some places are expensive to stay in, and my dad's job as a janitor didn't pay enough for luxuries like that." This concept seemed to puzzle Zara, who had clearly never wanted for material things. "So, where did you go for vacations?" "Sometimes we went camping upstate or visited my aunt in New Jersey. After my mom died, we didn't really take vacations anymore. Dad had to work extra hours to support us." Zara was quiet for a moment, processing this. "That sounds hard." "It was sometimes," Abigail acknowledged. "But we had each other, and that made it easier." Later that night, as Abigail was preparing for bed, there was a soft knock at her door. She opened it to find Sheikh Kareem standing there, looking slightly uncomfortable. "I apologize for disturbing you so late," he said, "but I wanted to speak with you before we leave tomorrow." "Of course," Abigail said, stepping aside to let him in. She was suddenly conscious of her simple pajamas and lack of makeup, but Sheikh Kareem didn't seem to notice. "I wanted to thank you," he said, remaining standing even though she gestured to a chair. "The girls seem different with you, more like themselves before the accident. They're remarkable children," Abigail said sincerely. "They're dealing with unimaginable loss, but they're resilient. They just need time and support." Sheikh Kareem nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You've given them more in a few days than all the previous nannies combined. I've been thinking the position was initially temporary while I'm in New York on business, but my work here may extend for several months, possibly a year. Would you consider staying on longer term?" The offer took Abigail by surprise. I, I need to think about it. My father will be welcome to stay here once he's recovered, if that would make it easier for you," Sheikh Kareem offered. "There's plenty of space, and it would allow you to care for him while continuing to work with the girls." It was an incredibly generous offer, one that showed a level of consideration she hadn't expected from the powerful businessman. "Thank you. That's very kind. Let me discuss it with my father this weekend." Sheikh Kareem nodded. "Of course. Take your time." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The girls told me about your mother. I'm sorry for your loss." "Thank you," Abigail said softly. "It was a long time ago, but some losses stay with you forever." "Yes," he agreed, his eyes reflecting a deep understanding. "They do." As he left, Abigail found herself thinking about how different Sheikh Kareem was from her initial impression. Beneath the powerful exterior was a man who loved his family deeply and was doing his best in an impossible situation. The next morning was a flurry of activity as they prepared to leave for the Hamptons. The girls were excited despite their attempts to appear cool and indifferent, and even Sheikh Kareem seemed more relaxed as they loaded into the luxurious SUV for the drive. As they left the city behind, Abigail gazed out the window, marveling at how much her life had changed in just a few days. From struggling janitor to nanny for one of the wealthiest families in New York, from worrying about making rent to considering a long-term position that could solve all her financial problems. But more than that, she had found a connection with these grieving children a chance to make a real difference in their lives. And perhaps, in helping them heal, she might find healing for her own long-buried grief as well. The Hamptons estate was even more magnificent than Abigail had imagined, a sprawling property with manicured gardens leading down to a private beach. The main house was an architectural masterpiece of glass and stone, with sweeping views of the ocean from nearly every room. As they settled in, Abigail couldn't help but think about the contrast between this life of luxury and her modest upbringing. Yet despite the material differences, grief and love were universal, bridging the gap between their worlds. In the shared experience of loss, she had found common ground with the sheik and his nieces, forming a bond that transcended their different backgrounds. And as she watched the girls run toward the beach, their faces alight with a joy she hadn't seen before, Abigail knew she had made the right decision in accepting this position. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, finding their way through grief toward healing, one day at a time.